lot of companies don't think about is any existing clients that you've got that have operations in the United States or Canada. Will your contact here introduce you to his counterpart in New Jersey and say, you know, these guys have been doing a great job for us, you ought to talk to them. There's a company in Campinas about 5 years ago that was doing some work for Johnson & Johnson out of San Jose dos Campos. And they got the CIO there to introduce them to a couple of the people up in New Brunswick, New Jersey, Johnson & Johnson corporate headquarters. And now that company, 2 years later, signed the master services agreement. They're one of Johnson & Johnson's only 8 global preferred vendors. And they're doing probably $1.5 million a year just out of that one account. So if you've got anybody in Canada that's got an operation in Canada or the U.S., definitely it's worth approaching them and asking them if you can get an introduction. You've got a track record. I mean, what's better than a personal recommendation? Business ended. If you're going to do the business in the United States, you've got to have a business in the United States. There's very, very few American companies that are going to sign a contract with a Brazilian corporation. Because if something goes wrong, they don't want to have to come down here and fight you. Now, that scares a lot of people when you say that. But the good news is, it takes about 4 days to actually form a company in Delaware. I've done it using my fax machine for Brazilian companies. It takes about 4 days and about $600, and it's done. And you've got a business entity in the U.S. So it's not a hard thing to do, although it scares a lot of people only because they don't know what that means to have a business entity. And then your Delaware company signs the agreement with the American company. Know your strengths and weaknesses. Know what your opportunities are. I mean, it all goes back to the strategic and the tactical plan. You know what you're going to do, a realistic time frame, a budget, so you know exactly what you're going to spend on the effort. A lot of Brazilian companies in the past that I talked to, they'd say, well, we're going to go to this Gartner event, we're going to spend $5,000, we're going to send 2 Brazilian guys to the Gartner event. Bob, we want you to go too. The 3 of you, we'll work the show for 2 days. And then when I talked to them a couple weeks later, they'd say, there's no opportunities for us there. If they didn't get a sale out of that first show, they were ready to quit. And that's just unreasonable expectations. You're probably not going to be talking to a serious prospect, for months. Your first deal probably won't come for at least 6. So it's not something where you're going to go to one show and you're going to walk away with a contract. That's probably not going to happen. Your first sale is going to be your toughest sale, because no company in the U.S. is going to want to be the first to deal with you. First thing they're going to ask you is, okay, who else you doing business with here? And then competition and pricing. As part of our strategic tactical planning, Robert and I do a competitive analysis to see who are you going to compete with and at what price, just to make sure that you've got a place in that market. I mean, you may not be able to compete at the prices that you're going to be competing with. Or you may have to adjust all your pricing so that you can compete. And it's amazing, you find these companies and you call them up and they'll just give you all this information right over the phone. It's incredible. So we typically put together a competitive analysis that says, here's 6 companies that are going to be your strongest competitors, here's what they're offering, and here's their hourly rates. Now what can you do? And it becomes part of that whole strategy. How to engage in the United States? I'm getting a lot of requests, a lot of conversations about Agile Scrum. And this is a huge benefit for Brazil. Anybody using Agile Scrum?
Yes.
This is a huge benefit for Brazil because of the time zone. You can't do Agile Scrum with India or China. You can't do it when you're 10, 11 time zones away. Because the perfect Agile Scrum environment, the Scrum Master's talking to your client's project manager every morning. And that works perfect with Brazil with the time zone. It doesn't work in India. They've tried it, and it's just been a disaster. I've talked to a lot of Americans that said, can't do it with these guys. You know, I don't want to be up at 11 o'clock at night on Skype talking to the guy who just got into the office in the morning. But what they like is they like a Scrum Master that like 30-day sprints. Deliverable code every 30 days. And I've seen, I saw a big agile project just end with a Brazilian company at Ticketmaster in Manhattan. It was a 2-year project that ended up being. That's a great agile project for 2 years. Doing 30-day sprints. If it's their first time going offshore, a lot of the U.S. companies are going to want an architect, a project manager on site for maybe the first 1 or 2 weeks of the project for requirements gathering, just to really kick the project off. That's what happened at Ticketmaster. 2 guys spent 2 weeks in Manhattan to kick it off, and then about every 4 months intervals, they'd go up to New York for a week just to plan out the next 3 or 4 sprints. So be prepared. Be prepared to have a key resource, have an American visa, and be ready to get on an airplane and disappear for a week. Because a lot of them will want that just to get comfortable with, working with another country, another company. So you should be prepared for that with visas. Obviously, good English skills with the key people, a project manager, an architect, a business analyst. You don't want somebody to say, okay, we're going to do the deal with you, let's go, let's get started, and you say, well, okay, we got to wait a month because we've got to get a visa. That's not going to go over big. You've got to be ready to say, okay, when do you want it? And do whatever you got to do it. I said this before, they're going to want to engage with a U.S. company. I can't stress that enough. If you're going to do anything in North America, you've got to have a business entity there. They're not going to sign with an Indian company, a Brazilian company. They're not going to want to deal with that. They're going to want to sign an agreement with a U.S. company. They're going to be
Bob,
very, very...
It'd be a U.S.-based corporation, not typically a U.S. company, but an organization that's established legally in United States soil. It can be your Brazilian company, but with a subsidiary established legally in Delaware, for instance.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that, an American company? No, it's a U.S.-based.
U.S. subsidiary of XYZ company, Brazil.
Yeah.
So you get into language proficiencies. English website is critically important. One of the first questions Robert and I get asked is, what's your website? We'll go visit your website. So you've got to have an English website, and the English, it needs to be good English, no mistakes. One of the things Robert and I do a lot is we visit websites for clients, and we edit the English on their websites and their marketing collateral, all their brochures and white papers and stuff to make sure it's right. Because every mistake points out that you're a foreign company. And you don't want that. You want total transparency. And then again, U.S. business visas for key resources. You can get away with a tourist visa, but the business visa is not any harder to get. You don't need an H-1B. You certainly don't want to go to immigrations at John F. Kennedy and say, I'm here to work. You want to say, I'm here for meetings with a client. Because they'll just turn you around and put you right back on the next Tom flight back down here. Because with just a regular visa, you can't earn. So you say, I'm up for client meetings or something. But you've got to have some business visas. And not wait for the opportunity to say, okay, now let's go get some. Because the client's not going to wait.